welcome everyone to the Red, White, and Matt show with Kenny. Today is episode 6. Our guest that was supposed to show on our last show, we're actually going to end up probably pushing him to the right, so he won't be on this week. We'll be focusing on the election, of course. We only have about a little bit over a week left until we have that situation under hand. But anyway, we're going to go on to our short stories. So we got a couple short stories. First of all, we're going to get with Bitcoin. Bitcoin now is up around 13,000. This was helped a little bit by PayPal. They're kind of looking to become an intermediary, something like a kind of an exchange for cryptocurrencies. So that helped boost it beyond the 12,000 mark. It was sitting around the 10,000 mark for a good while now. And they believe it's kind of at a stable position currently with Bitcoin. Separate from Bitcoin, we have the iPhone 13 actually being discussed. The 12 has yet to actually launch, but there were some potential issues with the iPhone 12. They're talking about the 5G capability kind of hindering the battery life for the new iPhone 12. It's the iPhone 13, and this was actually given out in Apple's plan when it was released on the iPhone 12, and then what they plan to do with the iPhone 13. And lastly, we have the new Borat movie. Pretty awesome. I watched it myself. Very, very funny. It's mostly critical of the right, but I thought it was perfectly okay. And, they crashed a couple of right-wing events. I thought it was hilarious just to see how serious people are. And, they can't really take a joke. And, of course, it's still poked at the left. But, yeah, so that wraps up our short stories. Now to go on to our articles, our main discussion. We're going to kick it off with what a Biden win would mean. Kenny, do you want to start on this topic?
Well, after listening to the debates and looking around at some of his party platform, I actually didn't see much different that he would have done than what Trump is doing. It just seems to be like their disagreement on timing and how much money should be thrown around. So I'm not seeing that even if he wins, it looks like he's going to pretty much continue on the same path that, as far as like the COVID is concerned, that Trump has been going down. As far as foreign policies, he said he's going to rejoin the Paris climate deal, and I don't know if you want to get too deep into that, but let's remember why the reason Trump gave us all why he pulled out of it, right? Okay, so you got America, you got China, you got Pakistan, you got India. Those are probably, like, as far as manufacturing is concerned, the top 4 in the world, right? The problem with the Paris climate deal was it only applied to the United States. And we're like, 300 million people. And then those other 3 countries is like 6 billion. And somehow the Paris climate change doesn't affect them for another 10 years. I'm not seeing how that was ever in America's best interest. And I'm not understanding how that's going to affect the climate when, the other 6 billion people on Earth don't have to adhere to any of the regulations for 10 years. It just seems like they're getting money out of us and they're not having to do anything. And, one thing that Trump said that I pretty well agreed with about, on the Paris climate deal is like, well, okay, China's listed as a class 2 country, right? It's also known as up and coming economy. I'm not sure how you can be classified as an up-and-coming country from an economic standpoint when your economy is rivaling that of the number 1 economy of the United States. Does that make sense? It's like you're not up-and-coming if you're already on top. As far as, like refunding who, like he wants to rejoin that. He wants to reinstitute the Iran deal that Trump pulled out of. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure they would probably join it. I'm just not entirely sure that they would abide by it. And I'm questioning like what he would do you know, if Iran does rejoin the treaty and they start breaking it. So I'm not entirely sure how he would fall on that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely like your take on the climate accord or the Paris Climate Accord. I think once more, Trump pointed out in the debate that, if we were to do that, then you can see these other countries in this graph right here. So you have the United States, that's at third. Then you have China, that's way up there. And essentially, China and Russia are not really part of these major deals. Then you also have India, who pollutes quite a bit too. They're a little bit lower in the graph, but their cities alone make up a good portion of pollution or smog, things like that. And then you see a bunch of the other countries that are up there together. So even though over 400,000, that's quite a bit of money. People don't understand what that kind of means when it comes to like the wealthy getting taxed. So what that means is we're going to have the wealthy leaving. They're going to be leaving. Right here, we have New York and California. That total tax burden would be up to like 62%. Obviously, they're going to be able to cut their taxes by some means because they do know how to do those type of things, as opposed to us normal peeps. But what you're essentially going to have, and what we've actually kind of seen during COVID, is people leaving New York. We could probably see similar things happen with taxpayers, especially high earners, or even your companies moving abroad again, as we saw under Obama, which means less jobs for us or less jobs for the regular person. Um, and even though he says he's not going to raise taxes on people that make less than 400,000, he might not do that. But if it's a Democratic Congress, and especially if they win the Senate, I feel like that's the ultimate doomsday plan. But if they all win it, I can guarantee you, in order to pay for all these different programs, they're going to raise the taxes on pretty much everybody. You can pretty much guarantee it because you have to pay for it somehow. Maybe he doesn't do it in the first year or two, but I could see some type of tax initiative coming about, or the Bush tax cuts ending. I know a lot of people don't seem to remember that or think about it, but that will raise everyone's taxes. Um, and people generally don't look at their taxes and say, wow, I'm actually paying like, 20 something percent or 18%, whatever it may be. Um, but you have to remember this, and you might actually start to see that when you're looking at your paycheck and you're like, wait a minute, that's another like $100 gone. What happened to the extra 100 I was just making? Um, what do you think about the tax stuff, Kenny?
Well, I got a couple issues on this. Okay, so when I was watching the debates with Trump and Biden, there seemed to be, especially on Biden's side, a disconnect of reality on how some of the stuff works, right? Okay, so he wants to go and it's like, well, we're not going to raise taxes on anybody, right? And at the same time, you look at his tax plan and some of the programs he wants to push, and it's like, well, where does this money come from, right? And it's like, okay, well, actually, we are going to raise your taxes. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, well, yes. Okay, let me. I find it annoying. I find it really annoying that these people have no problem having their pet projects and then passing the bill on to us like it's nothing. Does that make sense? Like, I
Yeah.
understand people don't like some of the things the wealthy and rich people do, but at the same time, it's like they earn that money. They've earned a right to have nice things. They've had a right to have a nice car or boat or whatever, and simply to use them as a, for out of better term, a blood bank, right? Where you can just suck them dry for your pet projects. What are these pet projects going to be used for? I don't know. I'll leave it to you for that.
Yeah, and the thing is, no, I completely agree with you. Like, if you have rich people in your country, there's no standard in the world for if people move their business to another country or headquarter it there, or if they move to a different country. There's no way, or at least in our law currently, that they will be taxed and can't just avoid the taxes altogether. Like if you're really smart in the US and you're rich, you move to Puerto Rico. Why is that? Because there's 0% federal income taxes. Because guess what? They don't have a a lot of people don't think about that. So, that's just one initiative that people with money, I mean, people with money, they can do these things because they have money. And Democrats seem to forget that. And, we're starting to see Democrats flow out of these heavy, or maybe not Democrats, but maybe more people in the middle, independents, people that were maybe previously Democrats moving out of these states. You see it in Texas. Everyone's moving from California into Texas. You had Joe Rogan recently moved to Texas. You had Ben Shapiro close his business down in LA, moved to Nashville. People are just fleeing these areas because the burden is too heavy on these different businesses, and they're starting to see that, and they say, "Hey, let's go to these Republican states where taxes are not so high." So, like I said, people don't really think about taxes because if you're not making that much, you don't really see it. But once you start to get up to, 60, 70, 80,000, you start to look at it and say 20%, like, wow, that's about, $10,000, $20,000 now that I'm losing out of my paycheck. And then it's like, well, if you get a Democrat governor or Democrat president in power, then you can start to see those things inch up slowly but surely, 2%, 4%, 6%. And then all of a sudden, if you're also in a liberal state, well, that's another, like, what, I don't know, 6%. So now we're at like 30%, and they're also increasing the federal. Okay, well, now we're going up to 30 what percent. And then if you're not a user of these social welfare programs, it's like, yeah, you're contributing. Hopefully you feel good, but at the same time, I mean, what are you getting out of it? You know what I mean? There's not much to get out of it at that point.
I think this also needs to bring up a discussion of what is considered wealthy. Okay, currently we're looking at, if you're making $400,000, you're doing pretty good, right? But if you look at what's the average house in America cost, 170,000, 200,000, and if you're making 400,000 a year, yeah, that's pretty good. But what does that really buy you? Especially if you got to be making the tens of millions to really take a hold of all these special tax programs that are available, right? Okay, so basically, I mean, I think you're going to be in a position where you have the mega wealthy that can take advantage of all the tax laws, and you have everybody else who is not a multimillionaire basically giving up their entire paycheck to pay for the programs of all. So they're not really targeting the wealthy. They're just targeting the people who are just above white collar, and they really are white collar. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, well, no, if you're making $1 million net or whatever, how far does that go in 2020? Not real far. And it seems like, okay, if you look in the scheme of, okay, people who make 20, $30 million, there's a lot of people like that in America, right? But if you do that and you separate them out like that, those people are making 400,000 are just getting shoved further and further down to, I don't want to say poverty, because it's not really poverty, but they're getting a lot closer to that $100,000 mark, where you're just really barely making it in America. The average household income in America used to be like 54,000. I think with this whole COVID thing, it's down to like 36,000, right? And we used to think 36,000, you were doing pretty good. Because if you remember, when you're working for like $9 or $10 an hour, that's like $14,000 a year. So if you're making minimum wage, you're doing sub 10,000 sometimes. So if you're making $30,000, that's 3 times what you would get making minimum wage. But if you go out to buy a car, the average car is like $40,000 these days, I think. I mean, it could be down to 30. I want to say like the average new car, mid-range car, is like $40,000. Well, think about it. It used to be, if you wanted to buy a house, there was no saying, like, you would spend a year's salary on a house. So if you made, $60,000, you really should not spend more than $60,000 on a house. Well, now you've got people who are making $30,000 a year, spending 2 years' salary to buy a decent car. We're not talking bottom of the barrel, but we're not talking high end either. If you want to look at, buying them like a nice Mercedes, what do those run? $80,000, $90,000. So, yeah, even these so-called rich people are still spending 25% of their income on like a nice Mercedes, and we're calling that rich, but they're spending exactly about a 1 year salary on a house. So if they spend $300,000 on a house, well, they just spent their 1 year salary on a house. So that would be considered, fairly normal. And like I said, with the price of housing, especially still going up, I don't know if you can consider somebody making 400,000 to be, rich.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and it especially depends on where you live at. If you're once again in a liberal stronghold city like LA or New York, Silicon Valley, if you had 400,000, if you were married to someone and you guys both made around 200,000 in these cities, honestly, you would probably be you wouldn't be well off. I can tell you that. You'd be probably doing okay, doing well, I would say. But especially in those cities, 400,000, that's not some sky high limit in those cities. Now, if you were to be out in the country or in a rural area, 400,000, was a lot. But people don't think about that. 400,000 in different areas means something else, especially in the US. So let's go on. We're going to lighten it up a bit, take a little break. Let's see here. We're going to go on to our game or our quiz. Our game. I'm going to go first here, Kenny. So, did you know in Colorado there's actually still an active volcano? But do you know the last time when it erupted?
I'm going to
Time
have to
frame
say
in history.
no.
Say again?
I'm going to have to say no.
Can't take a guess. You got to guess sometime.
I'm going to say 1850s.
Much before that.
Much, much before? And
Yeah,
it's still active?
still active.
It's not considered dormant. Okay, let's try. Somebody would have had to have been around to know it. So let's try 1670s.
No, so actually back to when the pyramids were being built. So
Yeah,
very
but how do
long.
we know it happened?
I mean, geological records, I would assume.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I
um,
guess that could be it.
yeah. All right,
Seems
what do
like
you
it's
got?
asleep at that point, right? Okay, so the flag behind me. What was the first year it was actually implemented?
Well, I believe it was 1775. If the conversation was correct before, or if that was a precursor.
Dang, I forgot. I forgot. I told you about that. I spilled my. Never mind. Good guess. Anyway, so a little bit of history. That flag back there is from the Culpeper militiamen, one of the original militias in the United States from Culpeper, Virginia, founded under an oak tree. Just a little history in America. Great flag.
So I guess the discussion on the Hunter Biden situation. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but essentially, Hunter Biden had a hard drive that was left at a computer shop, and this has been handed over to the authorities. And there's speculation that there could be like child porn on there, whatever that may consist of. There's also speculation that there's records on there that links his him to the Ukrainian company, and kind of like dirty dealings in terms of the amount of money that he made in Ukraine being on that board. Um, but the biggest thing and biggest issue I see is that connecting directly to Joe Biden. The biggest thing that they've been pointing at is this occurred during his term as vice president, and that would have been, like an ethical violation. Um, I just think that someone that's been in politics for, half of their life or almost their whole life, that they would probably be smart enough to hide this type of evidence and not tie themselves to this. So if you ask me, the whole situation's probably just going to be a nothing burger, because if there is something, it's likely that it's hidden and that the authorities probably wouldn't find out about it. Um, Kenny, do you think the same thing as I do, or what's your take on this whole thing?
Without seeing the actual evidence and what's it's contained, I really, even though I don't care much for Joe Biden, I don't think it's fair to throw him under the bus, especially if it's something his son did. Is there, signs of corruption there? Yeah, and I said it before. Okay, so the United States has been a country for what, 257 years, something like that? And Joe Biden's been in office for 47 of those. That's like 20% of the entire time that this country has been in existence, right? Um, yeah, there's been some time they did some corruption, but like I said, it's one of those things. I'm not sure I want to hold Joe Biden responsible for stuff his son did, even if he knew about it. Because, well, I mean, let's be honest. Just because we don't like it doesn't mean it wasn't legal. Does that make sense? And like I said, if his son did it and his son kicked him back 20% or 10% or whatever they're accusing him of, you know what? That's the son taking care of his dad. I mean, I can't really fault him for that. And like I said, just because it may not be legal in this country, it was not handled in this country. It was done in another country, and whether we like it or not, it still might be legal. Does that make sense? I want to see, I want to see more evidence. If the evidence comes out, that there were some pretty heinous crimes going on, then yeah. But again, like I said, I want to see that first because I want to see. I want that for anybody. I just don't want to throw somebody under the bus because we have a supposed hard drive full of information and it's damaging to this particular person. You know what I'm saying? I don't care who that is. I want to see that evidence before I make a determination. And like I said, I think in a lot of these cases, it was being done by a son. Maybe Joe Biden knew about the activities in general, but didn't know the specific details. And I mean, if it comes out that he did know about the details and he was influence peddling, I don't like it, but it wouldn't be the first time we've heard that from a presidential candidate. You know what I'm saying? And I said, I think it's going to come out to what the details are. And I said, I'm going to wait to hear what those are.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I don't know. I feel like the situation's just kind of a perspective from the right. They're trying to get back at the left, maybe for like the whole Russia thing. It's kind of like a last minute attempt to do something against the left in terms of some type of corruption. I think it has minimal effect on the election, especially. I think it just kind of hardens Trump supporters and doesn't really provide much into the current election. Separate from that, speaking of, I guess, foreign affairs, or at least Hunter Biden working overseas in Ukraine, I was going to go into our other article that we kind of touched on earlier with the foreign policy. We discussed the climate accords, but also people have to remember Iran was a completely different situation whenever Biden was in office than whenever Trump came into office, and he turned Iran pretty much upside down on its head. And now Iran's really hurting economically. It's unfortunate that people there are suffering also because of food shortages, especially during COVID. They had like a flooding crisis, I think, about a year or two ago. But we have to remember that situation is going to be changed. And also with the Saudis, we sold them lots of weapons. We made quite a bit of money with them. But if Biden is elected, that situation would completely change. And I think it would really destabilize our foreign policy that we've had going. Even with North Korea too. You heard him in the debate. He wants to get more tough with North Korea. And I feel like that's not a good de-escalation technique. I think Trump's administration has actually done a great job with foreign policy. Kenny, do you feel any different about that?
As far as like North Korea is concerned, okay, so I mean, the cat's out of the bag on that one, right? Okay, they got nuclear weapons. They are never, ever going to give them up because that's the one thing they got to guarantee that nobody's going to come in and take a dump on them. They'll never give that up. And the other part of that is, and they really are a puppet state of China, and I don't think China would allow it. So I'm not entirely sure that that is a country you can just step in and say we're taking your toys away. Does that make sense? I don't think that's ever going to happen. And there's too many people on that other side that have the ability to say, yeah, not today. So he can talk tough, which is kind of funny because he's always been pretty. Joe Biden has always been pretty fond of China. So I'm thinking he would probably work with China, and China would just basically say, "Not today, Joe." You know what I'm saying? So I don't see that going anywhere. As far as the Iran deal is concerned, man, I hate to tell you, the chances of Iran already having nuclear weapons is pretty high. They just don't. Okay, they may not have come out and told us because they don't have a delivery system, right? But I can almost guarantee you they got nuclear weapons. So that's going to be another touchy subject, you know, for Joe Biden. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so what are you going to do about it at the end of the day? If you don't have the ability to do anything about it, then the other country can say, well, you know where to shove it. And I think that's probably we're going to end up with both those countries. You got to remember, if memory serves me, Iran was working with North Korea as well as Syria for many, many years on their nuclear programs. I think it's safe to assume that they're all pretty well in the same boat. So if North Korea's got it, more than likely Syria's got it, and more than likely Iran's got it, because they both of those other countries have some pretty sophisticated, uh, they call them engineers or whatever they call them over there. Pretty advanced programs, put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, so I mean, you pretty much backed up what I was saying. We'll go on and change gears now to a completely, I guess, more of a domestic topic, right turn with, I would say, a favorite of a lot of people in the U.S.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
So yeah, so Bernie Sanders is going to be our topic of discussion here. I know Kenny's probably favorite grandpa or one of his favorite politicians. Um, so yeah, so there's actually been talk that Bernie Sanders is going to make a play, according to this article, for Biden to be Biden's labor secretary. So very interesting. I think maybe a little scary, uh, as we know what he is interested in. He got married. Was it in Russia? I believe it was Russia or Moscow. And he has several pictures with Russian leaders. I'm sure he's in the United States. His healthcare plan in the state that he's from, that whole plan failed horribly. Now, there's no official confirmation of this, but Bernie Sanders as the labor secretary, I can already see labor unions would probably become a really big issue if he got into office. He would probably do quite a bit of encouraging, probably be in touch with people that are in charge of labor unions. You'd probably see a minimum wage go up. I think an increase of a minimum wage, like a little increase, probably wouldn't be bad. If you look at the United States minimum wage throughout its history, or at least whenever minimum wage started, it really hasn't went up very much in our history. Especially over the last 20 or 30 years, not until Obama came in. But people have to remember with minimum wage, you can't raise it too high because you have people with those mom and pop shops that just cannot fork out the bill to pay people at certain wages. And it can hinder, small businesses where it's much harder for them to stay in business. And those types of policies are definitely something we have to watch out for once Biden, if Biden was elected, and if he got into office and tried to put that in immediately during the situation, it would definitely do a lot of harm, just due to COVID and businesses struggling. So hopefully if they did that, they would be smart about it. I think they would. And hopefully there's a Republican Senate still that can help stop or push back on a lot of the things the Democrats try to push forward. But those are the issues I see. Can you see any separate issues?
You ever thought, there'd come a time where, we could say that Bernie Sanders would probably be the sane one at the desk? Only in 2020. Only in 2020.
Yep.
Like I said, he's probably the most grounded of everybody that would probably be in the room, which is very, very scary. The other issue I have with Bernie Sanders, okay, you mentioned the fact that, he was married in Russia. Well, you're familiar with Larry Beznyov, right? The Russian defector from back in the 70s. Well, he did an expose in the 1980s about how they would bring over rich American students to indoctrinate them, right? And they would talk about how they would, bring them around Moscow, show them how great communism was, and then give them the pamphlets about how to spread communism. And then you look at Bernie Sanders' background, and you're like, I think he must have been one of Larry Beznyov's proteges, if you know what I mean. So I think that's probably where he gets a lot of his ideology. But again, he's kind of in the same boat as Joe Biden. He's been in office for 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah.
But he's been pretty consistent on his beliefs. So I'll give him that he's at least has an ideology. And unlike Joe Biden, he can kind of stick to them and he can kind of explain them. But at the same time, it's like they're still failed policies and they've never worked anywhere in the world. So, another day in Washington. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, at least Bernie has been honest about he's pretty much honest about everything he's done is for. I give, I have a lot of respect for him because of that. And even his supporters. And honestly, if you look, this is kind of interesting, but if you actually look at all of Bernie Sanders' things that he stands for, sure, there's quite a bit of aggressive government overreach policies, but there's actually some things that are, like libertarian, if you really look into his policies deeply, such as ending like certain things that would actually remove some of the government intervention. So that's actually pretty interesting. But, most of his policies, though, are, lots of government overreach. I guess you could call it communist if you wanted to. But yeah, no, I agree. Like I said, I think the biggest hope if Joe Biden is elected is that the Senate remains in Republican hands. That's our best hope, to be honest.
Now, I have a question. Okay, so what is Bernie Sanders? Okay, if he is making a play for labor secretary, I would want to know what his agenda is going to be while he's in there. You brought up the issue of they want to raise the minimum wage like $15 an hour. Okay, so unfortunately, I think most people don't understand economics. Okay, let me ask you: if you're making, let's say, $7.25 an hour, which is the current minimum wage, and gasoline is $2 a gallon, and a loaf of bread is $2 a loaf, what difference does it make if you're now making $15 an hour, but the price of a gallon of gas is now $4.15, and a loaf of bread is now, $4.50. You know what I'm saying? It's all relative. I mean, it doesn't matter what you make. It only matters what percentage do you spend on your household income. You know what I'm saying? So, if they raise the minimum wage and everybody's making more money, it does a couple of things. One, at some point, and I'm sure there'll be a slight lag because there'll be some mental resistance to people paying more for goods and services. But, okay, your cost to manufacture a product is going to be what it's going to be. You know what I'm saying? And a company never loses what's called margin. Your margin is the difference between what it costs you to make a product or service and what it actually sells for. If a company doesn't make margin, there's no point in being in business. So they're not like somebody milking a cow is not going to milk for free. If they're going to do that, they'll go someplace else and make more money. That's just how business is. So there'll be a mental stagnation where people don't want to pay more money, but it'll eventually have to happen. You know what I'm saying? It might take a couple of weeks, or a couple of months. But so who benefits from it, right? Federal government does. they benefit because everybody who was now in a lower tax bracket, if they don't change things, they're going to find themselves in a higher tax bracket, and they're just going to take more of their money out of their paycheck in taxes.
Let's wrap this one up here. Maybe we'll get in a deep dive on minimum wage sometime and wages and things like that, the job market, whatever it may be. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps everything up. Our next episode, we're going to be covering the election and our election predictions. Obviously, we're just wee men and we don't really know a whole lot. We're not political map experts, but we are going to have our own little map up and kind of give our take on which states we think will win and why we think certain states will go a particular way. You know, is the secret Trump voter really that effective this election, or you know, just various topics. Kenny, anything to add on that?
We'll leave it all for the next episode, I think.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. You know, what a Biden win would mean to you guys. Doesn't seem very rosy to me, but I'm sure there may be. I think it may be a little bit more peaceful domestically. I think if Trump was to lose, you know, I think some of the tension we had seen in the country might lessen a little bit. So maybe one of the few positives, I think, if Biden would won. Other than that, though, thank you guys for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment below, especially if any other videos you'd like us to touch on, any certain topics, anything like that. Please follow our Instagram. Please follow our Twitter. Definitely need some good likes and follows on there. It'd be well appreciated. Thank you guys so much. Kenny, anything to add?
No. Appreciate y'all watching. Come see us next time.
All right.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
That concludes this American experience.
Hey, thanks for watching the Red, White, and Matt Show with Kenny. Please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for another American experience.